system. So I actually brought my own system. It's called a personal amplifier device. So it's great for group settings for up to 10 people because everyone can put on a headset and be able to make adjustments based on their volume preferences. But it seems that we're okay here. All right, and I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes to see if anybody else is going to trickle in, but I'm very excited to be here. So what are you guys saying? Did you say something? Were you talking to me? I can't lip read, so I wasn't. I saw that it said you were saying something. I didn't know if you were talking to me, but no problem. That's okay.
No, I think right now we're just kind of talking among ourselves.
That. I completely understand. So this is my first time here. And I think I parked way over that way. It ended up being quite a long walk through the building, all the way back around. But I think that's God's plan because we drove over 2 hours to get here today. And so obviously we needed to get our blood flowing, so it all works out. All right, so this place is massive. I imagined something a little bit smaller, but this is so nice. Wow, I was really impressed by this location.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Gideon Friant, and I'm the Hard of Hearing Services Specialist. I'm from the Wilmington Regional Center, and we're with the North Carolina Division of Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I'm excited to be here, and especially thankful for Anne, who I met at the Scotland Memorial Library. And we were able to have a great conversation there. And she mentioned that she knew that there were some other people in her community that have hearing loss as well, and they might want to learn some more. And so I said, sure, I'll be happy to come out. I'm collaborating with Jake today, and I'm happy to be here to discuss different things related to hearing loss. During this presentation, if you have any questions, if you're not understanding something, if you'd like me to repeat, explained more in depth, or go back, I'm happy to. Today I'm using a sign language interpreter, so she will be my voice. So from my first language, American Sign Language, to English for all of you. But I see Mary here is able to understand my signing, so I'm sure that doesn't often happen here that she has a presentation in sign to enjoy. All right, so I thought we'd start with an icebreaker today. I have a few questions for you, and I just want to see if you think they are true or false. I'll ask you to raise your hand, and I'll say, okay, if it's true. But first I'm going to read off. 16% of the general population in North Carolina has hearing loss. How many people think that's true? Raise your hand. Okay, so how many think it's false? Good job, you are right. It is 16% of the population have hearing loss. Number 2, the brain physically shrinks if hearing loss is untreated. How many of you think that's true? And how many of you think it's false? 2, okay. But most think it's true. 2 said no. So that actually does happen. And the reason why is because the importance of communication. If you are not constantly communicating and having your brain stimulated and excited about language, your brain shrinks. It's not that it becomes lazy, but mental stimulation is incredibly important. And so it's something that needs to be addressed because hearing loss can impact that. Using over-exaggeration with your lips when pronouncing words helps a person with hearing loss to understand better. So what do you think? Is it true you should over-exaggerate? Okay. So some of you say maybe. Some of you raised your hand yes. How many of you think it's false? All right, a few people. In the real world, it is not necessary to over-exaggerate the words you're saying. You want to speak normally. Now, it can be helpful to add some additional movement. So maybe more clearly, more emphasis, enunciating. And also it's important to include your facial expression to make sure that your face is matching what you're saying so it clarifies if you're asking a question. Number 4, hearing aids and or cochlear implants help people with hearing loss to hear normally again. How many of you think it's true? Okay, so we have some people thinking it's false. You have a hearing aid yourself, I see. For most people, this is not true. So if you were a hearing person from the time you were born and you had normal hearing, later on had hearing loss, when you first try out a hearing aid, you're going to notice it's not perfect or it doesn't sound as it was supposed to. So some things are louder than you used to be and some things are quieter or some things are muffled. So there's a lot of variety in experiences. Cochlear implants. Oh, do we have someone in the audience with a cochlear implant? Great. So I'm sure you may be willing to share your cochlear implant experience. No, that's okay. Yep. So some people, it does help to communicate again. That is the goal of cochlear implants and hearing aids, is to provide communication. But it does take practice with those devices. All right, so do you think that I should stand over here in front of the window for us to communicate? Is that more helpful? The problem is, if the sun is behind me, that person is looking at me, and if they depend on lip reading, for example, that sun makes it even more difficult to see the mouth. So that is not a great idea. Now, it may be helpful to have light from multiple sides, like we have in here, to make sure it's very clear and you can see those facial expressions. Okay, so that was our icebreaker. Good start, everybody. Let's move on. So many people have a general understanding of hearing loss and they feel it's not that big of a deal. But I like to compare it to an iceberg. So, I mean, the ear is a fairly small part of the body. I can still move around, I can walk, I can go and do most daily activities. But what I hear is how I communicate for most people. And so that greatly impacts your life in ways you may not think about. Socialization. Financial reasons, you may have to pay for a hearing aid. And some people, when they start to lose hearing, they notice people are looking at them differently, or they're getting left out of conversation, and their independence lessens because they have to say, hey, do you mind calling, or can you tell them I don't understand what they're saying over the phone? And so there's so many different impacts that hearing loss can have. So how do we address that? There are a lot of different paths and methods for how you can address hearing loss. But it doesn't mean that that's the only concern. It could also be mental health. You might be isolated. You might find yourself avoiding things that you used to enjoy. Some people might find a way to continue, but others are too upset with the fact that it's not how it used to be. And so I just want you guys to be aware and consider that hearing loss impacts every area of life. All right, so one thing that I was thinking about is hearing loss is one of the most overlooked disabilities or health issues, whatever perspective, however you want to look at the situation. But it's one of the most overlooked. It's not as well taken care of compared to other things because people make the assumption that it's no big deal. But as you get older, your vision tends to worsen, your movement tends to become more difficult, and your ears are the same. You tend to start losing your hearing. And so people might notice that hearing loss worsens quality of life, and that's because they're not able to communicate with the people they care about. And so that quality of life goes down. Group conversations are difficult. And so just so you're aware, the percentage of people with hearing loss is increasing. So if you can see this, by 2040, we actually predict to have 1.7 million people with hearing loss in North Carolina. That's a lot of people. So how can we address this? And so there are different ways. For myself, you notice that I use sign language. So I have hearing loss. When did my hearing loss begin? For me, it happened while I was in my mother's womb. There were medical issues that happened during that time that impacted and caused my hearing loss. So I was born, and my family was expecting me to have physical deformities, mental deficiencies, vision loss, and of course, hearing loss. So my family was ready to accept those challenges. And when I was born, the doctor said, "This baby only has hearing loss." And they were like, "Thank God, that is all that we have to deal with." So it's just hearing loss. But people often come up to me and start talking, and I don't know what they're saying. And I don't know what to say to them. And people will ask, "What's wrong with you?" I just have hearing loss. But you look just fine. You look normal. Sure. And that happens when I start to sign. That's typically when people can recognize that I have hearing loss. But deaf people look normal, so to speak. So I might offer, would you like to learn sign language? Some people are, yes, they're enthusiastic. But others are like, oh, I don't know how. And I always offer, I can show you. Oh, I don't have the time. But other people are very motivated. So we see a lot of different reactions to meeting people who are learning that I have hearing loss. And it's something I've accepted as I've grown up. One of the best parts is that my family knows sign. And so I can communicate with my family. And that creates lasting relationships that are strong because communication is integral to relationships. So now, your favorite picture, Anne. So I'm curious here. I know I noticed a few of you have hearing aids, so that means obviously you've had a hearing test at least once. But who in the room has never had a hearing test? Who has never had a hearing test? Oh, okay. One person in the room. Does that mean everybody else has had their hearing tested? Oh, good job, everybody. I'm very happy to see that. I have my hearing tested. I go and get it checked to find out whether I'm losing any more hearing, because I admit I do rely on the remaining hearing that I have. So for example, I play video games. I like to watch movies. And to best enjoy the sound effects, like the airplanes going overhead or the bombs dropping from the film, or being able to hear those machine guns, or the beautiful violins and the music and other performances. So I enjoy those things, even though I can't understand the words. So the words are not clear for me. And you may remember what this is called, this yellow section of the audiogram. Yes, it is. Good job, Anne. It is the speech banana. So, if your hearing test results after you've gone, and typically it happens, you put on a set of headphones, you're listening for some beeps, you raise your hand if you hear them, depending on which ear you heard it in, and the doctor then makes notes and graphs out your hearing. And so they put lines across. If your lines are above the speech banana, that means you can hear all of the sounds of letters. So you've got M and B and N and the S and the TH, even those silent letters like the F and the sh and the th. And so that means that your hearing is at a normal level, 20 decibels or above. If you start getting below 20, you might miss a few sounds and you may understand speech fairly well. But once you get to the middle of that speech banana and you're missing things like the J and the D, you're already starting to struggle pretty hard to understand speech. At 50, it becomes even worse. So what about me? What about my hearing loss? What does it look like? Now, your audiograms may have a straight line. So they may go across just like this. So if you have hearing loss, you may see that kind of line and it goes down, a little dip. My hearing loss starts here about 65, 70. That's where I start. And then it dips down to 80 to 90 and swings back up to about 70 again. And so I have this curve, and I am well below the speech banana. So if I were to use a hearing aid, for example, that would bump me up to around here. Yep, I still would not be able to understand speech. So for that reason, I can hear everything in that bottom section, but speech is not something I can understand. Now, if I'm trying to hear something like water dripping, or maybe something else happening, I wouldn't be able to. I may get really close to something, and I may then be able to hear it. So water fountains, for example, if it's across the room, I'm not going to hear it, but as I get closer, I might start to be able to hear that. So it can also depend on the sound level. Some of you may be thinking, oh, well, I can't hear some of those things. So for some people, you just need that louder volume. So if somebody's talking quietly, and then you're just having them raise that volume a whole lot, and then it feels like the person's yelling at you. But that can be helpful for a hard of hearing person to understand if you raise the volume of what you're doing. Because then for a person with normal hearing, it feels like, ow, that hurts, you're yelling, that's too loud. But that's normal for me, for a hard of hearing person, so it may be a challenge. Now, hearing aids are helpful in some situations to help you hear better, but they don't always work. You sometimes have to adjust how you communicate when you're using them. Any questions about the audiogram? Okay. All right, I want to briefly touch on a couple of things. So diabetes and some other health implications. Talk with your doctor about this is what's really important. Make sure that anything related to your health and how it is currently is not influencing your hearing. Find out if any of the medicines you're taking could cause hearing loss. It's very important, obviously, to take your medications as instructed, but there is a possibility some of them may impact your hearing. Also, people with diabetes, because they have blood flow issues, that circulation isn't as good, it can be a challenge because within your ear you have these tiny little hairs. And if there's not good blood flow within those hairs within the ear, and they're no longer healthy, they're not able to pick up sound as well. And so that can impact your hearing. So diabetes is untreated. You may start to struggle to hear, and I would say hopefully it wasn't permanent damage. Again, always talk with your doctor, talk with your audiologist about your current status and what you can do to protect your hearing. I mentioned earlier about brain impacts. So with dementia, some people it often is caused because people are socially withdrawn. So if I'm alone all day and I'm not interacting with other people, I'm not communicating, I'm not working my mind, there's no stimulation for my brain. And so that can then cause dementia. Now, whether it's part of the disease or chronic, whether it's something that, but it's great, one way that you can try to prevent that is that mental stimulation. And so it's important to make sure that you're able to communicate in order to reduce your risk.
Hey, question. Can you go back to that chart?
Okay.
The,
Thank you.
The bar on the left-hand side, is that loss in decibels? Or what's the graph?
Yes, that is in decibels on the left-hand side. So it is in decibels, and so that's how loud the sound is. And so that matches with an audiogram, this chart here. And this is the pitch, so the frequency. So we've got low to high frequencies. So it's kind of like the piano. On the left side is the low sounds, and then on the right side is the higher sounds. Once you get older, you are more likely to lose those high-pitch frequencies first, because the hairs itself that detect that are on the outside of the ear, whereas the lower hairs are on the inside. So since those outer hairs get more exposure, they're closer to the outside of the ear, they tend to wear out earlier. And so they start to shrivel, and it makes it much more challenging. And so if there's a reason why you're not able to hear someone, it's possible that they have a really high-pitched voice. So for example, I can always hear my husband just fine, so a man's voice. So somebody who has a much lower tone, it's easier to communicate. But it's, an exercise for the vocal cords to try to keep your voice lower if that's not natural. So the lower you are, and therefore the more hearing loss, which then can lower the chance of your ability to communicate, which lowers that mental stimulation, which then can cause dementia. So there are so many different factors at play. So thank you, that was a great question. All right, I touched a little bit about medications already. Please talk with your doctor to see whether any of your medications are, if a medication may cause hearing loss, if you're able to switch to a different medication. Because really, once you start losing that hearing, you don't want to lose the remainder of it. But again, just keep in mind that some medication can cause hearing losses and there might be alternative options. So people may call me untreated hearing loss because I don't use hearing aids myself. I do sometimes use earbuds when I'm gaming or watching movies. And so that means that my speech, so for example, if I'm talking with my family definitely understands me when I'm talking just perfectly. However, you or other people, if I talk, you're probably not going to understand me. And so my family, they've lived with me, and so they're very used to how I say specific words. And the reason why I say specific words the way I do is because that's how I'm hearing them. And so that's how I think they should sound. And so that's why speech can be impacted by hearing loss. So if you might think, oh, I'm talking just fine, why is no one understanding me? It could be that you're speaking based on what you're hearing, but if your hearing isn't great. So for example, you may not even be able to really hear yourself speak. I do have a friend who had a seizure, and the next morning he woke up and his hearing was gone, just completely gone overnight. And so that was a result of the seizure. So he learned sign, but he also still spoke with his family. But his family let him know, your hearing seems to be impacting your speech because you don't talk how you used to. You don't sound like you did before. And people, if he talks on the phone, people don't recognize he's the one calling. So it is very interesting. He decided to get cochlear implants, and his speech is actually back to normal. I wouldn't say it's maybe perfect, and I wouldn't be able to identify that anyway, but he was able to make that adjustment. I'm actually curious myself to know whether it is the same. Have you noticed that as well? May I ask? You with cochlear implants? So just to let you all know, so she was just mentioning that lower voices are better for her, and she struggles to hear high-pitched voices. Yep, and speech is incredibly hard. Okay, some examples of auxiliary aids. We've already talked about hearing aids, and some of you already have them. We talked about cochlear implants. But what else is available? There are a few that I'd like to mention. Obviously, we have an interpreter in the room, so that is one auxiliary aid for communication. But for those of you who don't use sign language interpreters, may want to consider captioning. So, for example, we could have another screen right here where there was captioning so you could read what was being said. Now with today, speech-to-text technologies are pretty wonderful. All right, so there are other ways to do captioning. So for example, are you familiar with the court stenographers? They actually can also do captioning. So that could be during a church service, during a presentation. So whatever information you really don't want to miss something, that's when you should consider making a request for communication access through captioning. And we have information about how you can get that coordinated and set up. But that is another thing that's available. I actually didn't know that until I joined the staff, because there are sometimes I can't focus solely on the interpreter. Sometimes I need to pick up my water bottle, right? I can't stare at the interpreter the whole time. And so I have to disconnect my eyes from the interpreter to then pick up my water bottle, and I missed it. But if they have captioning, I can look over and get caught up. And so then I can continue using the interpreter. So that is very nice when it's offered. I think it benefits everyone. So I've mentioned that sometimes in group settings, maybe if you guys are going out or someplace where we don't have a mic system set up like this, they'll use headphones with a receiver. So those headphones could either have a telechoral loop, and in that instance, so if you used a loop system, then that device would let you use your hearing aids. But essentially these are different amplifying devices. So receivers, headphones, and then again that loop system. So it's something to consider. If you're going to a museum with a tour guide, or if you're going to the movie theater and you'd like access, consider requesting those auxiliary aids because it will make it less of a struggle to understand what's being said. Here's another example here on the top right. For those of you who depend on American Sign Language, you can consider getting video remote interpreting. So you can see the interpreter on the screen, and so the interpreter can then do their job remotely. And so whatever the important information it is, in this example, to your health, is a doctor's visit, or if you preferred an in-person interpreter, that's also an option, but it's good to know your options. All right, so this is essentially a system where you can text each other back and forth. Some people, for example, they aren't able to speak anymore, and maybe they have hearing loss, and for those people to be able to communicate, it's one other example of assistive technology that may work. Any questions about all of this? Now I'm curious, how many of you guys have a smartphone? Okay, it is a beautiful thing. The technology, wow, I can't believe it. I am so happy. I mean, I remember back in high school, we had nothing. And I'm sure, you know, you guys may not have even had computers when you were in high school, but now I have a computer that fits in my pocket. It's amazing. Now, there are different things you can use your phone for. For example, you could call your friends or family through FaceTime or a video call. And so finally, you can lip read with your family even if they're somewhere else. You could also connect it to your hearing aid. How many of you have your hearing aids connected to your phones? Good, awesome. That was not previously an option, but now Bluetooth can be built into the hearing aids, and that connection is fantastic. I remember I showed Anne that you're also able to do captioning during a phone call. So Google Live Transcribe or Apple Live Captions features. And oh my goodness, I could not believe it. I could finally talk with my friends and I could understand them just fine. Didn't matter that they were a hearing person that didn't know sign, and luckily they were able to understand my speech pretty clearly, and with the captions I understood them. And we were able to make that connection, which was so nice. But what about in person? Should I call you even though we're sitting in the same room? That'd be a little weird. But they also have captions right there on your phone, so you can have them for the conversation. So I'm going to pull out my phone right here. This is an Android. And I'm going to pull out Google Live Transcribe. So it's got a microphone in the phone, and it's picking up the voice of the interpreter, and now it's starting to caption what's being said. Can you guys see that? I'm sure it's far away, but you can see that there are words coming across that screen. I'm going to go and show the audience a little bit closer. Yes, so it's captioning ever since I started, and so it's catching when I'm speaking, which is pretty cool, and I use this all the time. And awesome job. I see she's got it pulled up on her iPhone as well. I love the independence it gives me, and so I am able to do things on my own. So my phone is with me everywhere, and so when I travel by myself, I don't have to do anything. Bless my parents for, how often. They'll often ask me, like, are you okay? Can you do everything yourself? And I was like, oh yeah, I drove 600 miles out for myself for this road trip to visit a friend of mine. And then when I go to the bank, I can do that on my own, and I can set up my investments because I have communication. It's amazing. So if you can imagine what a phone can do for you, there are a few different examples of how a phone might be able to assist you. There's speech to text, phone calls with captions. Even some apps have hearing aid connections where they can actually help you find where your lost hearing aid is. So hearing aids are one thing that are very easy to lose. So, because hearing aids are so small and they're very lightweight, they could so easily just fall right down and you might not be able to find them. Easy to overlook. One of my deaf friends literally bought a cover that is bright pink and yellow, as bright as they could find, so they would be able to easily spot their hearing aid if they dropped it. So that is one non-traditional option if you find yourself losing your hearing aid option. But again, these things are $1,000, $2,000 or more. If you lose it and you can't find it, you would then have to pay that much again to get a new hearing aid. Ugh. All right, I do want to mention just a little bit about us, who we are. We are the North Carolina Division of Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We work under the Department of Health and Human Services. So, this is just to show you where we are. Scotland County here. You guys are covered by the Wilmington Regional Center. Hi, that's me. That's where I work. So we're from the Wilmington Regional Center. There are actually 7 centers across the state, and they all provide the same services. So regardless of where someone lives in North Carolina, they can receive our services. Does anyone know how many counties we have? 100, yes. A perfect number, a perfect 100 counties. So that means we had to make those divisions of how many counties per region. And so some are bigger cities, and then some of us have more rural areas that are spread out. But we travel anywhere there are people with hearing loss to provide services. This is our office currently. We have the Hard of Hearing Services Specialist. That's me. Hi. We have a Deaf Services Specialist, and her name is Daisy. If you are considering, some places that are more out of the community and they don't have accessibility, you can contact Herbie, and they can give a consultation to teach places how to be friendly for deaf and hard of hearing people and improve their accessibility. So, what kind of accessibilities are out there? And then Herbie would be able to help that location work together to make sure that our community has accessibility wherever they go out in the community. So a few things that I would like to do. So for example, if you do a lot of self-advocacy, maybe you know your rights. You know that I have hearing loss, and if I need access to CART to be able to be involved in the town hall meeting, and then they're refusing, or maybe they're refusing to provide an interpreter for you. It's possible that they don't know how. And so we're able to both help advocate and educate. And so that's something that we can do. Just so that you guys are aware, there are laws in place that make sure that deaf and hard of hearing people have communication access. And if you don't know how, we're happy to support you and create that resolution. Sometimes people say, well, I have hearing loss now, and I don't know where to start. What am I going to do? Yep, we are a one-stop shop. So at our center, we've got plenty of resources, and so we can refer you to other services specifically related to hard of hearing needs. We have a very large network, and we're a wonderful place to get started if you find out you have hearing loss. Also, I want to touch a little bit on our programs. So you might be aware of some people who have hearing loss, but maybe their health insurance won't cover a hearing aid. That's one of the reasons why we created the Equipment Distribution Service Program. So the state can provide one no-cost hearing aid. They would go to one of our contracted ear, nose, and throat doctors or audiologists, and then go through our program to get the approval, and then that hearing aid would be good for 6 years, and at that time they could get another no-cost hearing aid as a replacement. But hearing aids don't work for everyone. Maybe they need something different. So maybe a landline phone might be helpful for them, or a captioned phone, or maybe something different to help them within their everyday life. So an alerting device that helps them wake up in the morning. So that alarm clock, you know, can have that flashing light, because I'm not going to be able to hear if it's just sound. So how would I wake up? Some people use the light, turning on and off. So that flashing light might wake some people up. But for me, that doesn't work. So I use what's called a bed shaker. So it's a small disc about yay big that you put underneath the mattress. When I go to sleep, I get woken up to the shaking device. And so it does help me wake up in the morning. I've been asked, does it feel like an earthquake? And that's a pretty good explanation, but it doesn't give me a heart attack, so. Again, like I say, this is not a one-size-fits-all situation. So I know a few of you have hearing aids. Do you know if you have the telecoil within your hearing aids? Have you heard of the telecoil? Okay. So are you guys familiar with Bluetooth? Okay. So the telecoil is a little bit of an older type of technology. Bluetooth is becoming a much more prevalent option, but the telecoil was the golden standard previously before Bluetooth came into effect. So if you would go to a venue or a theater and you recognize this sign right here, the T stands for telecoil. So if your hearing aid has a telecoil, that means that, for example, maybe in this room, if they have a loop system installed, then that might be able to work. Now, the way a loop system works is it's actually all within the walls. And so it's within that room, and it directs the sound into your hearing aids and makes it easy to hear what's being said. So that's what the telecoil can do. But more and more, we're shifting to that Bluetooth. And that means that they have other connections. It's kind of like a Wi-Fi connection, and so it means multiple connections are possible. Now, Bluetooth is often 1-to-1, but that system could be 1-to-5 or 1-to-10, and so they're able to allow more people to use their hearing aids. So that's one thing that you can look for. If you see that sign, the blue sign there with an ear, that means that telecoil is available and you could have better access through your hearing aids. All right, so speech to text, the tablet we have here. If it's, too small on a phone for you to read, a tablet is a great option and allows you to see the captioning a lot clearer. The newer computers you'll have a better chance to have captioning. Now, if the computer is an older device, it may or may not. For example, Windows 11, but Windows 10 does not have it, so Windows 11 does. Now, Apple with the newest M-series processor probably can caption things, but if it's not the M-series processor, it probably won't be able to caption something. So it can be helpful to contact the manufacturer and say, hey, does captioning work for this? And if you don't know, feel free to check in with us or any other technology experts who can give you a hand to figure out whether your device can have captioning. So this is a wonderful picture of a woman who has hearing loss and vision loss. Wow, can you imagine that? Vision loss and hearing loss? How do you communicate? I previously worked with her and she used sign language, but she had a really hard time seeing my signs. And so she would actually lay her hands on mine to feel my sign language. And she was able to understand it that way. But she also used different forms of technology. So her computer screen had a zoom text feature, so she could look at it very large. There were also contrasting colors, and so she would be able to read specific words and see pictures much better than otherwise. So technology can be equally important for people with vision loss. Thankfully, we have a sister agency called Division of Services for the Blind, and we have collaborated with them for many years to help people who have vision loss and hearing loss. I just wanted to throw this little tip out there. If you go to any medical offices, there is a chance that you're struggling to hear your doctor what they're saying. For example, they're using these really long medical terminologies and you're not even sure you heard them correctly. You might ask them, "Can you please speak English? I don't understand that word." But something you can of course ask them to explain more thoroughly, but if you prefer, you could get captioning service at your doctor's appointment. Or you could use what's called a pocket talker, this little device here. So she's got a headset on and the doctor's holding a mic. And so in this way, she's able to hear the doctor directly and clearly. It's especially helpful if they don't have hearing aids or if their hearing aids are broken. And for example, if they're going specifically to let them know, "Hey, my hearing aids aren't working," but then you wouldn't be able to hear your audiologist because they're not working. So we have a Medicaid Communication Access Service program, and one benefit is that we can provide one of those pocket talkers. And so please let us know if you would like your doctors to sign up with this program, and we'd be able to set up a visit with them. Any questions? So last little tip for you guys. I recently got a new driver's license. I've been driving for many years, if any of you guys are surprised. If you notice, the driver's license are new and they have an icon. So if you remember that blue icon we had previously that we talked about, you can actually get that on your driver's license. So that means in the system, if a police officer or another employee pulls up that has access to that information, they can find out that you have hearing loss or that you're deaf or hard of hearing. And that means they're going to be aware when they approach you. And so they're not going to assume that you can hear just fine. And you have to then say, "Oh, please, I can't understand what you're saying. Can we start over?" And so it helps prevent misunderstandings. However, the new driver's license has moved the location. It used to be here, and it is now here. So, just something to know. I think there might be better visibility in the new location. Yes?
For people that no longer have a driver's license, do you follow the same procedure that you would for a driver's license to get this under state ID?
Thank you. So the state identification card is still the same. You can add that icon. And it doesn't matter whether you're a driver or not, whether you get an NCID or the driver's license, you can add the icon. The icon was added due to an unfortunate situation. So prior to that, there was no icon. And so you would just have to do your best to inform them that you couldn't hear. And so they've set up this system because someone did not hear the police, and the police yelled, "Please stop moving, stop moving." And they continued walking, and they were shot in the back. So that police officer did not know that they had hearing loss. That information wasn't in the system. And so that's why the state established this system, so that we have information and they're able to see it. Okay, so now I can open the floor up to any and all questions. So she just mentioned that previously she used to call using a TTY, which is a teletypewriter. And so that is it's the old way to communicate for anybody with any phone. You actually read what's being said and you type, and it's through a relay service. And so yes, so that was a very slow process, typing out everything that had to be said, then saying go ahead and allowing the next person to go. It was very important to maintain that turn taking and follow the patterns. Now we have video relay service where we can just pull up an interpreter or we can just text. So we have much better means of communication. But you are right, the teletypewriter was very popular and is almost completely phased out at this point. I am wondering, may I ask what you use now to make phone calls to friends and family? How do you make phone calls? Do you use a TTY still? Oh, so you go to an audiologist for a cleaning. Okay, so a while ago, what was it that you were finger spelling right then? I'm so sorry, I'm not following.
Name it. Name it.
Long time ago? Okay, it was something that happened a long time ago. Yep, that's all right. So now TTYs are not used. I actually, funny enough, still have my old one at home, but I haven't touched it. But it is good for emergencies. However, the analog phone lines are also starting to go away. Everything's now digital, and so at some point it's not going to work at all. So it's going to genuinely be useless. So, it's been very helpful, but now that we have internet and computers, there's been a huge change in access and what that looks like. Any questions? How many of you have family who also has hearing loss? Oh, Jake in the back, he says, what's your name? Alicia in the back. And Jake both have family with hearing loss. Likely someone you know has hearing loss. Within my family, my dad has started to lose his hearing. I've noticed that. I asked him about it, and luckily he knows sign language and he agreed, so it's a bit of a relief. He's still able to communicate. My brothers and sisters all have perfect hearing. However, all of my brothers and sisters have glasses except my oldest brother. Is there something, are you tricking us? Are you wearing contacts? We don't even believe him, but he says it was nothing. Some people are just fortunate to have perfect vision, and I wish I had perfect eyes. I have to wear my contacts every day. So that's what I'm wearing currently, put them on in the morning. But when I take them out, oh my gosh, I cannot communicate. I am lost without them. It's what allows me to see the world. It does depend, I depend on my vision a lot. And so because I have to watch for everything, and at times it can cause strain and your eyes can become very tired. There's nothing to split the load because many people have both their vision and their hearing to rely on. And so it means I have to take very good care of my eyes so I don't lose my vision sooner than most people. You may notice yourselves losing some hearing and you may become more observant. You might see more of that visual information and you're able to notice, oh, I can see they're talking about something important, or I also see that food is ready, somebody's already got their plate, I should probably go ahead and grab my food. So you start to become more observant, and it's how I live my life every day. Because I'm not going to understand anything I'm hearing. Any questions? I did bring one thing. It's called a pocket talker. I'm going to show a quick demo.
She had a question.
Yes, who do we have a question from?
If you have been diagnosed with narrow ear canals and they're collapsing, is there anything I've been told there's nothing that you can really do about that?
Wow. So unfortunately, I'm not a licensed audiologist myself, and I can't really answer that question, unfortunately. Now, if a medical provider, an audiologist, specifically mentioned that there was nothing that you can do, that many times people can feel very frustrated at that. There's only so much we can do medically to help with hearing. So I'm happy that you consider the cochlear implant would help you hear better. Kind of rerouting the sound. Because if you have issue with that primary organ, that route, the canal, the workaround can be helpful. So I'm glad you're able to hear again, but it sounds like it's not exactly the same as it was before, right? Yep. So you kind of have to relearn sounds and how they are now. I'm glad that it's working fairly well for you. I've actually known people that cochlear implants didn't work at all. So there's a lot of consultation to make sure that a cochlear implant will be successful before you go forward with that surgery. And it's all right to shop around for different hearing aids or shop around for the best technology out there because it's constantly improving. So you can't help your hearing loss over time. That's likely to happen. Now, for myself, I'm looking forward to, there's a possibility I may have a cochlear implant at some point in the future, but right now I'm satisfied with my life. But when it starts to impact how I'm able to do things that I want to do, then I'll have to weigh and I may shift my perspective and may end up with a cochlear implant. But right now, I know I don't need it.
So the question I have is, what's the difference in a cochlear implant and a hearing aid?
So a hearing aid uses your primary tool. So you're here and it's going to use what the remaining hearing that you have. That hearing aid device is kind of like a prescription, so it's specifically adjusted to what areas you're lacking in your hearing levels. Cochlear implants, from my understanding and what I've learned from audiologists, their presentations and information, it seems that they're rerouting the information, so the hearing part. So you're turning off the hearing from the ear basically and connecting to a nerve with an implant surgery back here.
Okay.
And so then the cochlear can run through and reroutes it, and it acts and behaves like the hair that you would have in your ear in order to send those same signals to the brain. So that's how a cochlear implant works, but it is different based on individual experiences. It helps many people with their hearing, getting some of that back, but cochlear implants themselves have to have a processor, and so that's going to be magnetized to your head, and then there's going to be a microphone that sits there. And so it looks like a hearing aid. It's not, but it looks kind of like one. The interesting thing about those is when the battery dies or if the processor breaks and you take it off, you are totally deaf. And so a hearing aid, if you take it off, maybe you can still hear a little bit. You know, something really loud you could hear. But with a cochlear implant, when you take that off, you're done. You're deaf. There's no hearing. So while it's working, that's great, but when you have to take that off, you are deaf. And so some people can handle that, and other people, it makes them second think that. And it's all right. It's understandable that different people have different perspectives. You have to consider your safety and your preferences. So for example, if I have a cochlear implant and I take it off and I'm profoundly deaf, am I going to be able to hear the fire alarm? When I'm asleep in bed and I don't have my cochlears on, or for example, if there's an announcement of an emergency in this location, of a fire drill or something, any kind of safety concerns. Because sure, you can hear when they're on, but what about when they're off? And so it's important to consider what are the most important parts of your life that are going to require hearing, and what can you find as an alternative or as other assistive technology to fill in the gaps if you're not using them. So for example, for me, I've got my alarm clock that shakes my bed to wake me up. And so that's my replacement. That's that technology for me. There's also a doorbell system in the house. If somebody rings the doorbell, the lights flash. And so I'm able to see, oh, somebody's at my door. And so I'm able to then go and greet them. And so that is a replacement for hearing for me. Some people have fire alarm listeners, which is a small device that is basically placed as close to the fire alarm as possible. So then it's listening for that fire alarm, and then it can either shake or flash lights to let you know. But what if your fire alarm is in the hallway, not in the bedroom? Yes?
I have heard that you cannot hear music with cochlear implant.
Would you be willing to confirm, or are you able to hear or enjoy music? So she's wondering whether those with cochlear implants can listen to music.
Yes, I can hear music.
Okay. Good.
So you have to consider what's behind the word hear. So maybe she's able to hear music, but how well she's able to hear it, how clearly she's hearing it, what it sounds like for her, that's a whole nother story. So the word hear versus whether or not you're enjoying it. But everybody varies, their experiences are going to be different with the same technology. So it's great to talk with people that have already gone through the surgery if you're interested. And it's always great to share stories and information to see whether it might be beneficial to you or whether it's not for you. There's a lot to consider. I think that we're about wrapped up at noon, but if I have any more questions from the audience, please feel free to come up and talk to me, okay?
Thank you. Drive safely, you guys.
So just so you guys know, regular applause isn't great, so we actually put our hands up and we wave them like this for applause so we can see it, since we can't hear traditional applause. So thank you. Thank you all for coming. I've enjoyed talking with you all today. And it was wonderful to see you again, Anne.